It was one of the most impactful things in my entire life. It really did change my perspective. At one point in my life, I literally hated myself. It was almost to the point where I felt guilty for existing. He might still be here today if he had learned these things. When I realized that, it was the least I could do to share nonviolent communication with people. I tend to feel emotions really intensely, especially anxiety. And sometimes I forget to take deep breaths. Like I have really shallow breaths, and nonviolent communication helps you to see feelings and discomfort without judgment. So we don't see being sad as a bad thing. We don't put any judgment towards it. It's just a signal that you're disconnected from your needs. Aside from your feelings, what you're physically feeling, you can notice that without thinking that it's a bad thing. So, like, my heart is racing. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm noticing it as an objectively true statement and not saying it's bad that my heart is racing or my chest is tight. I can say that without having any judgment tied to it.
Being present with your body versus judging it.
Mhm.
And what does it mean to be present?
To recognize without intellectualizing. So, in nonviolent communication, one of the main parts of the framework is observation. And that's really important to me. Like, if I had to throw all the rest of NVC away, I would still want to have that part with me because it's really easy to look at things and automatically judge them or criticize them or blame other people for them or label them. But with an observation, you're just saying what is objectively true. What is something that nobody could argue with because it is a truth statement. It's not my opinion, it's what is actually true. So instead of saying, I'm just an anxious person, that's a label. I can say, whenever things are really important to me, my heart starts to race. That's an objective statement. Doesn't have any judgment tied to it. It's not an opinion. Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm thinking of exploring that further. I'm also curious what brought you to NVC.
Oh. So, for a really long time, I thought that there was something wrong with me for feeling things really intensely, for having really deep feelings. Because when I looked around in my life, a lot of people around me didn't experience emotions and feelings the same way that I did and weren't as reactive. And it was almost to the point where I felt guilty for existing because every time something would happen in my life, I would feel really intensely. And then I would feel bad for feeling really intensely because I thought it was a bad thing. Like I would feel guilty or feel ashamed. And so that led me to wanting to learn more about it. And initially, when I did,
Let me stop you. So you were spiraling. So like things were happening. You were noticing there's a difference that you got upset and then you spiraled into being upset at being upset and then maybe being upset at being upset about being upset.
right,
And
exactly.
and you're like, okay, well, this is happening to me and like other people seem to be okay. Like something's going on. And so that like how did you hear about NBC? Were you just like looking for a solution?
Yes. And the solutions that I found at first were things that were tied to traditional psychology. So things like diagnosing yourself with labels. And so I started to do that. And it was almost like I was trying to self diagnose in hopes that I could fix myself, implying that there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And so I went down this self help rabbit hole, as some people do, and I found NVC. And it really caught me off guard because it wasn't doing the same thing as all these other things I was learning. It was I was able to notice my actions and notice the way that I was feeling without judging them and without self-diagnosing. And it wasn't until I hit a really low point in my life that I actually started practicing NVC. So I found it initially and I was like, "Oh, that's different." And then later I came to it because one of my closest friends unalived himself. I don't want to say the word cuz YouTube whatever. And I had never had someone close to me die before
Mm,
or like much less die in that way. And so it really hit me and I realized that I needed better tools to work through my emotions and to work through my feelings because at this point, these were the most intense they'd ever been. As you can imagine, grief is crazy. It really is a roller coaster, like people say. And so I was realizing, like, okay, I need to do something different because what I'm doing is not working. And so I circled back to NBC and I told myself basically, if it doesn't work in this situation, it won't work for anything. But if it does, it'll work for everything. Because this was
mm,
like the most intense that I've ever had emotions. So I
yeah.
was like, if it works, it works. I'm willing to try. And as I started practicing it and researching it more, I found it really helpful. Like, it was one of the most impactful things in my entire life. And it really did change my perspective, and it was really helpful for grieving. And so I started to apply it to different parts of my life and just test it out, kind of like the scientific method. Like, I wasn't thinking, oh, this is the right way to do things. It was just like, I just want to try. I just need to see if it works for me. And if it does, that's great. Like, no harm, no foul. So when I realized how much it was working for me and how beneficial it was for me to process my emotions and to work through them, I was like, how do people not know about this?
Mm,
Like, it actually was working. And it was so simple. I was like, there's no way that I just ran across this and people don't even know about it. Like, this needs to be taught everywhere. And so I ended up making an Instagram account because I felt this really strong desire to just keep sharing what I was learning. I kept learning more and more, and it kept helping me. Like, there was nothing that I ran into that was like, oh, like, that doesn't really work. Like, it actually worked. And I'd never found anything that was that tangible and that applicable to my life. And so I started that account and I still share things on that account. And basically I just share what I learn. I'm not there as like an authority figure. I'm just saying this is what worked for me and I hope that it can help someone else in the same way or some similar way. To tie back to my friend that passed away, I really do think if I had these tools earlier in my life and was able to show them to him, then maybe he would have not seen that as the only way to get out of a situation. Like, he might still be here today if he had learned these things. And when I realized that, it was the least I could do to share nonviolent communication with people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I love that. I love the scientific exploration of it, that going from like that moment of desperation and like, oh, I guess it's time I should try this. And if it works, it works. And being so shocked and like, oh my God, this is like a magical wand. And but does it always work? And like slowly like trying it out in different situations. And then from your experience, becoming so passionate and seeing how it transformed you to wanting to share your experience. I want to say teach because I do think you're teaching others, sharing and giving others the information that improved your life. I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you. I think it's really helpful for people to have tools to work through their emotions because that's something that every human experiences. Like, that's not something that you can just run away from. You're gonna feel something at some point. And if you don't know how to work through it, it can harm you and it can harm the people around you and it can really rob you of a lot of experiences.
Um, what experience, like my mind
A
goes in
lot of
like
thoughts.
a few different directions, like, man, what experiences has NBC opened up for you that you wouldn't have been able to have before?
So, at one point in my life, I literally hated myself. Like, I did not like myself. I didn't like the person that I was becoming. And I would judge myself so much. I would criticize myself so much. So, one thing that it's helped me with is to be more compassionate and more graceful with myself and to have self acceptance and self trust. And then on the other hand, it's also helped me to have better relationships with other people because I'm able to be more empathetic and understanding and not automatically judge someone or intellectualize what they're saying whenever they're talking to me or get defensive when someone says something that I disagree with. Like, I'm able to actually connect with what's alive in them, and we can get into what that means in a minute, but it really helps me to see the humanness in other people and connect with that instead of just assuming that what I think about them is correct.
What comes up for me is, in my experience, in the past, if there were negative emotions coming up in me from experiences of other people, um, I would just leave. But now, because I'm able to process it, within reason, it also becomes an opportunity for me to be there longer term and just sit and process myself and also be there for another person in whatever way feels right.
What do you mean?
I'll make up an example. Let's
Okay.
say uh, someone, if we're talking about like riots in Los Angeles, and they're expressing opinions that I don't necessarily agree with, and they're going on about it. But before, like I might want to argue with that, or I may get tired of that and just leave, especially if it was, behavior like that, and they were always talking about the news and something else, and it would bring up too much pain in me. Um, in these moments, I can be more present and notice, well, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? And if I start to notice like judgment of them or myself, to rework that. And so there, it allows for a deeper connection to myself, a deeper connection to them, and a sustained presence of that exchange. Whereas that exchange would be more minimalized, because it would be difficult to sustain it. It would be not enjoyable enough for me.
So are you saying like it kind of helps you to get connected with the need that's not being met for you in that moment? And then also recognize that in the person speaking, like you're able to see there's a need of theirs that's not being met. And then you're able to kind of empathize with that instead of just automatically judging them.
That's right. Yeah. So if they're saying something that I don't agree with, well, like, and I'm noticing like judgments of them, I'm like, well, why?
Yeah.
And that's as simple as that. Why? And then I start to hear my story, or I start to realize, well, I want them to agree with me. Well, why do you want them to agree with you? I want them to tell the
Yeah.
truth, and just like starting to decompress the stories in my head and the beliefs of right and wrong, because
Mhm.
they, like, even though I might be good in certain situations to see it, another situation will come up in a different part of me that has that deeply embedded right wrong belief thinking, will come out strong and sort of blind me from the tooling and wisdom that is there.
And it kind of makes you like turn what could have been a moment of understanding and deeper connection into an argument and trying to be right or trying to win.
Right. It can be like an anger experience for both very unpleasurable. I want to win a lot. I see a lot of like, people talking politics often doesn't make sense to me. Like, yeah, I understand it, but in another level, it's like, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. It's like, what are you doing? Like, what
Exactly.
are you trying to do? Right?
They're trying to convince.
And then like even like talking about like expanding my presence, like even being in a situation like that where I see people who are doing that, for me to have that own acceptance as well, instead of that judgment of like, oh my God, like you guys are, uh, like maybe I can play a role, but sometimes it's just like let things be like that. It's a level of acceptance because I can't fix all the world's
Right.
so-called problems.
Yeah. That would be a lot of responsibility on you.
That would be a lot of responsibility. I didn't sign up for that.
And at the end of the day, you can't really change someone's mind. Like it's their choice to make. You know, you can present someone with all the evidence in the world and they can still think differently. So it's really about connection before correction. If you're not trying to connect with them before you start correcting them, they're most likely not even going to hear what you're saying. They're just going to get defensive.
And what comes up for me is like logic is often built on feelings. And so if you're speaking on the logic level, that's not getting to the root of the underlying issue. If someone is hurt because they believe that Elon Musk and Trump are destroying the US and you argue against them and you present facts, they don't see the facts. They have an
Right.
underlying pain that's not being heard and understood. And unless that's
Address.
addressed or something similar, they're going to persist in trying to be understood.
Right. Exactly. I think Marshall Rosenberg says it beautifully. He says that a lot of times when we're trying to express things, it's just a poor expression of an unmet need. So we'll say, "Oh, he's a terrible person. I can't believe he did that to me. He betrayed me." And then really it's like, I'm sad because I needed support and I
Yeah.
wish that he was there in that moment or something like that. You know, or I wish he did this specific thing. But a lot of people don't have the language to actually articulate that. And so it comes out as judgments and criticisms.
Would you be willing to walk us through the NVC process and the pillars of NVC?
Absolutely. So, luckily for everybody, it's only 4 steps. I don't have some 10-step framework that takes forever to learn. So, I'm going to go through them and then say each specific one, kind of explain them. So, observation, feeling, need, and request. So, for the first one, observation, I kind of touched on this already, but whenever we make an observation, we want to say what is objectively true. So, we want to make sure that the statement we're making isn't tied to any sort of judgment or opinion or criticism or analysis. It is what is objectively true. So, an example of what this would not be is you're such a slob. But an example of what it would be is I see dirty dishes in the sink. That is something that both of us could agree on. There's dirty dishes in the sink. But for me to say, oh, you're a slob, it's an opinion. So that's what an observation is. What is objectively true? And
So
then
why can't we say you're a slob? Like, what's wrong with that?
we're talking about morality now. I wouldn't say that's right or wrong, but the person is less likely to hear you out on what you're about to say if you create that disconnection and tension. If I call you a slob, I'm more likely to get a reactive response from you. You're going to say, no, I'm not, or you're going to judge me back in a way, or you're going to completely dismiss what I'm about to say because what I'm saying is just my opinion. It's subjective, it doesn't matter. But if what I'm saying is something that we can both agree on and we can find that point of agreement, then it sets you up for the rest of the conversation where change can be made.
So you want to draw attention to something without leading someone else to being defensive or have an energy that isn't connected to you in that time.
Correct. Yes. And that's not to say that people won't still get defensive because, sometimes people have heard you're a slob or you're stupid or you're annoying. They've heard that so many times that when you come to them with an observation, they automatically assume that's what you mean. So it's not like saying this is going to work in every situation every single time. But what I am saying is that you're a lot more likely to get someone to understand where you're coming from. So you can't control how someone else receives it, but you can control what you say. And that's what NVC focuses on. So, an observation, what do you see? What do you notice? Even if it is true that they're a slob, it's like, what actions are they taking or what is observable that would lead you to that assumption? That's how you figure out what the observation is. So, like, why do you call them a slob? Is it because they don't wash their dishes? Then just say that. It's more clear, it's straightforward and to the point, it's concise, and both of you can have that point of agreement. And then, if you want me to move on,
Either way, if you've got more that you want to say about observation.
I don't want to overcomplicate it, so I'll go to the next one. I fear I already have.
Yeah,
But
we can do examples. There's different parts of observation. I'd like to look at like the pitfalls of observation, how to go wrong. But yeah, maybe the next class.
I'll get through the framework and then we can go back. So, after making an observation, we want to say what we're feeling. So, we're not totally negating what's subjective, but we want to make an observation first and then say what we're feeling. What are we feeling because those dishes are dirty? Are we upset? Are we overwhelmed? So let's say that you're overwhelmed. Them not doing the dishes is leaving you overwhelmed. Whenever we are stating our feelings, we want to make sure that we're not describing what someone else did. So we're not saying, I feel like you don't care. That's not a feeling. We're not saying, I feel like you're neglecting me or I feel neglected. That is not talking about what you feel because it's saying what they did. They might have neglected you. They might have neglected what you said, but you don't feel neglected. You might feel sad and you might feel overwhelmed, but you don't feel neglected. That's what they did, or that's your judgment of what they did. And so a feeling is how do you feel? Not tied to any certain action or person. How do you feel? So then, so observation, feeling. The next one is need. So a need, again, is not tied to any specific action or person. It is something that is universal to the well being of all humans. So instead of saying something like, I need you to do the dishes, that's not a need because every single person in the world doesn't need that person to do their dishes. It's not a universal need. So instead of saying, I need you to do the dishes, you say, I have a need for cleanliness, or I need reassurance, or I need space. Like, say you want to use the sink for something. I don't know. It can be anything that could be applicable to every single person that would enrich their life or is fundamental to their well being. And then the last step, so we have observation, feeling, need, and the last one is request. So you can think of this as a strategy. And I'm going to go into that in a second, but whenever we make a request, we want to make sure that we're not just demanding someone to do something. We want to come up with an action that we think would meet our needs without saying, do this right now, or if you don't do this, I'm going to do this. It is a way of trying to ask someone to do something and being okay with the answer being yes or no. If we have any sort of expectation, or if we're not okay with them being able to say no, it's not a true request. It's underlyingly a demand. So you need to be okay whether they say yes or no. And an example of this would be, would you be willing to wash the dishes when you're done watching your show? It is an actionable yes or no question. They can say yes or no to it. And if they say no, then you can figure out what need of theirs is not being met and then come up with a strategy that meets both of your needs. Maybe they have a need for relaxation and your need was for cleanliness. Well, There's a bunch of different strategies that you can use to meet those needs, but asking them to do the dishes when their show is over is just one strategy. So NVC is really helpful because you're able to look at something without seeing only one way to meet your need or the need of two people. There's a bunch of different strategies. And not only can it be used when asking someone else something, but it can be used when you're talking to yourself. Or if maybe you want to ask someone without talking about your needs, you can ask someone about their feelings and needs. So if I were to put all of those together, it would be observation. I see dirty dishes in the sink. Feeling, I feel overwhelmed. Need, because I have a need for cleanliness. And then request, would you be willing to clean the dishes after your show is over? So that's all of it smushed together. So if I was talking to myself, if I wanted to use it with myself, my observation could be, I'm noticing that I haven't taken a break in a long time. I'm feeling overwhelmed and I have a need for rest or to relax. And then my strategy could be taking a nap or going to bed early or maybe just watching some YouTube or something. There's a lot of different ways that you can meet that need for taking a break or having rest or relaxation. And then if I were to use the example to talk to someone else and guess what they're needing and feeling, I could say something like, I noticed that I haven't been invited to hang out lately. Are you feeling, let me see, are you feeling upset because you have a need for trust and integrity and you would like for me to do the things that I say I will or uphold my promises? So in that scenario, maybe I said that I was going to be there at a certain time and I wasn't. And then since then, they hadn't invited me to anything. That's a way that I could confront that, saying what I notice and then asking them if they feel a certain way because they need something that they're not getting, and then guessing what strategy would meet those needs. And the beauty about this is you don't have to be right. You're just asking them. You're giving them the opportunity to say no and expand on maybe how you got that wrong. Maybe they were feeling tired and they just needed some space. Maybe it had nothing to do with you not showing up on time that day. And so opening the door for a conversation without trying to be right is really beneficial because it allows you to have more understanding and connection with someone. So those are three ways you can use NVC. With yourself, telling someone about your feelings and needs, or guessing someone's feelings and needs.
Yeah, thank you for going over the pillars of nonviolent communication. Uh, what comes to me is just going in. We mentioned another talking point, the jackal language of "you're such a slob, you need to clean these dishes now, or else like you're not gonna have ice cream later," or depending on who you're talking to, or I'm not bringing you on a date, or I'm holding out something. Um, and so, like the question is, what the statement to me is like that doesn't feel good. If someone said that to me, I'm not going. I may do the dishes, but I'm not going to do it with a joyous heart.
Right.
And so, why does NVC? Well, like I think the problem and the solution. Why does NVC solve this, and what is the problem related to that?
So instead of assuming and instead of criticizing people or waving over someone fear of you not loving them anymore if they do something or using language that creates resentment or trying to control someone or causing harm to them or threatening them either by taking something away or doing something to them or causing harm to them or putting their life at risk or hurting someone that they love, instead of doing things to win at the expense of other people, NVC allows you to connect with people empathetically and to have understanding for them and to prioritize mutuality. So you're not saying I'm better than you and I want you to do this and you have to do what I say because I know what I'm talking about and you don't, and blah blah blah. You're not using labels. You're not trying to use authority in a demeaning way. You're having a conversation that is based around respect and understanding, and your goal is to try to get both of your needs met. You're not just trying to win. You're not just trying to have a goal of only meeting your needs. You're trying to figure out what solution would benefit both of you and in a way that's honest and that invites cooperation instead of control. And sometimes we sort of get into this place where we are just trying to please people. We think that if we do something it'll make them happy. And NVC helps us to not people please because it's centered around autonomy and it's centered around making decisions and communicating with someone how you got to that decision or why you want to do things that way. And any language that denies choice automatically creates like this power struggle and it automatically robs you of an opportunity for connection with someone. Also, I think it might be helpful to explain the difference between jackal and giraffe. So, the guy that created nonviolent communication, he wanted a way to symbolize someone that's using nonviolent communication, or it's also known as compassionate communication. So someone that's using it versus someone that's not using it. And so someone that is using compassion when they're talking or using nonviolent communication, we refer to them as a giraffe, or they're using giraffe language. And then when they're not using it, then they are considered a jackal, or they're using jackal language. And he just does this because in his workshops he would use hand puppets, and so instead of like talking to someone in jackal, which kind of is off-putting because he would do it pretty intensely for example purposes, he would use a little hand puppet and kind of make light of things and show the difference between it. It's a lot easier when you have two different symbols to show people instead of just speaking in that way and having to say, oh, I'm a jackal now, oh, I'm a giraffe now. So, just for people wondering, that's the difference. Giraffe is NVC and jackal is not NVC.
Using puppets to model conversation is such a useful technique, and I've taught English before to non-native speakers, and to show that interaction in a non-confusing way, it was super helpful. So
Really?
having different modalities of speaking, I can imagine that was very helpful for him.
That's cool that you used that.
It was a panda.
I love that. When I first saw Marshall doing that in a workshop video of his, I was like, what is this man doing? Like, is he crazy? Because the things he was saying and the things he was showing with the puppets, I was like, what is going on? But as I watched it more, I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like he's trying to make a point. And I think it is really helpful to see the difference. Because it's when it's one person talking, having to switch between the two is kind of cumbersome. So I think it's really helpful as a teacher to have those symbols, even though I would say giraffe and jackal are labels. He's using them in a way just for reference or just to teach.
Yeah. Agree. I wanted to circle back and say one more thing about the problem of the jackal statement, like the dishes are dirty, you're such a slob, you need to do it now. That might be effective in getting someone to do the dishes.
Oh
I,
yeah.
I, I've certainly had people tell me things like that, and I did what they say. But the problem and issue there is that I'm not doing this like out of like this joyous place in my heart. I'm doing it out of fear or some sort of negative emotion. And the framework of NVC opens things up to show and express, starting with the observation, a situation in which someone else's needs aren't being met. That I'm not doing something wrong. I'm not being criticized, but it's saying like, hey, this thing that's happening, like I'm feeling a certain way. Could you help me? And then it changes from like, oh my God, they're going to beat me, or to like, oh my God, I can help them. And it comes from a place of joy. And that is a huge, huge change.
Yeah, Marshall actually talks about that and he says it's not that using NVC is the only way that it works. Because let's say punishment and reward, for example. People say, oh, well, punishing your kids is the only way to make them listen. That's not true. And that's a dangerous way of thinking. But, anyways, that's besides the point. It does work. I'm not saying that punishment doesn't work or that fear of authority doesn't work or anything that's jackal related. It does work. But here's the thing, what do you want their reason to be for doing that thing? Do you want their reason to do things the way that you would like to be because they see the value in doing it that way? And because they're doing it out of the willingness of their heart and they see the way that it's beneficial? Or do you want them to be doing it because they're scared of what will happen if they don't? Or they don't want something taken away from them? Because think about this, what happens when that thing is removed? When you're not threatening them anymore, they're going to go back to doing the thing that they wanted to do in the first place because that thing is being removed, the thing that was stopping them from doing it. So instead, whenever you use nonviolent communication and you actually allow someone to see the value in doing something and to do it willingly instead of forcing them to do it, then they're able to make the decision in a way that is more long lasting and more enjoyable. They don't see giving as a burden anymore. They see it as a gift. It's an opportunity. And they're not just doing it to please you, they're doing it to serve you.
I would definitely want to be raising children that are giving me gifts as opposed to believing that they're being dominated and doing things out of fear and
Exactly.
getting away with it when I'm not around.
Yeah, if all their life you say do this because I say so, the second you're not there to tell them what to do, what are they going to do? The exact thing that you don't want them to do.
I want to train them to, like, in the face of fear, to be able to process it and not just be pushed in certain directions as well.
Because then you will have more trust in their decision making because you know that they're doing it because they want to and because they see the value in it, not just because you're hanging something over their head. And then it allows you to not have to be overbearing all the time and to micromanage every decision that they make.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good for me. I mean, it feels good in some way. Like when I've been angry and express it, it can feel good, but I think there's mixed emotion that comes with it to to be compelling someone to do something out of fear.
Yeah, it's like if you just want to be right in a situation or you just want to have authority over someone, like, yeah, go ahead and be a jackal. But if you actually want to have a connection with someone and you want to have trust and reliability and to have a good relationship with them that lasts, the last thing you would want to do is to speak to them in jackal. Because they're not seeing you as someone that's understanding, they see you as someone that's just barking orders or that has all these expectations of you or that denies your ability for choice, that robs you of autonomy, or that doesn't respect you, or someone that only gives you things whenever it benefits them, or takes things away whenever they want something. Like, I think that people get respect and fear confused. They think that in order to respect someone, you have to fear them. And I just don't think that that's the case. I think when people say they want respect, a lot of times they mean they want someone to fear them, when really there's other ways to get respect that doesn't involve putting your relationship on the line.
Do you have an example that speaks to you?
Well, just the example with the child. I mean, if you want to have a good relationship when they grow up, breaking them down and telling them that they don't have a choice to do things may make them dependent on you in the short term, but then the second that they have the opportunity to get away from you and make their own choices, they're going to do that. They're not going to want to have that close connection with you. And I think that allowing people to do things for their reason or giving someone a choice is a way to love them or to show that you actually care. And instead of punishing them for not doing what you want them to do. I would say the only time that using force in NVC is acceptable is if it's a protective use of force.
What does
So, for
that mean?
example, yeah, so for example, in my opinion, I would say hitting your child is not okay. That is using force that's maladaptive or that's problematic or not beneficial in the long term. It might get them to do what you want, like spanking your kid or hitting them or whatever, but the reason for doing what you're asking them to do is not the reason that you would want it to be. You want them to do it because they see the value in doing it or because they're doing it willingly. Like that would be the reason that you would want them to do it. But the way that you're going about it wouldn't make that happen. But I would say a protective use of force is different. So if your kid is about to run in the middle of the street and the only way that you can keep them alive is to grab their arm as fast as you can and yank them, even if it hurt them, you were protecting their life. So I wouldn't say that that sort of force would be not in line with NVC because at the end of the day, you were trying to protect them. That was the only way that you could save them. Otherwise, they would have been dead. So that's what I mean by protective use of force. Even though that is a use of force, you're not giving them a choice. It's still to protect them so that they don't harm themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So going back to the dishes, um, you're such a slob. Like you need to do the dishes right now, and then they say no, and I just spank them, and that's that's not a protective use of force. That's me wanting obedience.
Because you wouldn't do that to an adult. If you asked an adult to do the dishes and they said no, you wouldn't sit there and beat them. Like, why would it be
Yeah, I'm
okay to
getting
do that to a
spanked.
child? Right.
Yeah.
Like, why would it be okay to do that to a child that like has less reasoning ability? Like, it doesn't make sense.
So in that situation, why am I doing it? Out of anger or to compel them to do what I want, but not necessarily to protect them. And maybe I have an idea that I'm protecting you from bad behavior. Um,
Uh,
I'm protecting you from being a near do well.
That's love.
I'm doing it because I love you.
Mm-mm. No. Love requires action, and hitting someone is not an action of love.
It's easier to look at polarized examples. Like you see someone, okay, now the child doing the dishes after you ask them is upset, and like they just like start to smash and destroy the house, and then like, okay, well that's not good. They're destroying the house. We need that to live, um, and I physically stop them, and that's
Right.
a use of force for protection. And so those are sort of extremes, but is there a discrete boundary in which we become very close between the two? And I'm not immediately sure where that is.
If there is another way to protect them other than hitting them, I don't see why you wouldn't do that. Or if there's another way that doesn't involve causing harm to them, I don't think it's the most beneficial way if you're trying to prioritize the relationship. If you're just trying to get them to do what you want, it'll work. But what actually matters at the end of the day? Like in your example, instead of hitting them so that they stop throwing a temper tantrum, you can pick them up, you can hold their hands, you can ask them to breathe with you, even if they're not doing it. You can hold their hands there, you can talk to them, work through their emotions with them, and you can empathize with them and ask them, like, are you feeling this because you're needing this? And sometimes I'm not saying this works in every single situation, like, that's not what I'm saying. But being curious instead of trying to control them is probably going to get what you want in a way that you want it rather than just trying to make them do something. Because if you just make them do something, their reason for doing it is not going to be the reason that you want, anyways. Like, if I say that if you don't stop crying, then I'm going to take away your toys, or if you don't act right, you're not going to be able to go to your friend's house later. The only reason that they stop what they're doing is because you're going to take something away from them. If you didn't use that, then they would probably continue to do the thing. They're not doing it because they want to, they're doing it because they don't want you to take something away.
Yeah, it's the fear versus out of love again.
Right. But then if you say something like, I can tell that, you may not want to do the dishes right this moment based on your reaction. I'm just guessing. And let's say that they were like playing a game or something and you interrupted their game and asked them to do the dishes nicely and then they threw a temper tantrum. It's easier to have an actual example than just talking vaguely. And let's say they started throwing a temper tantrum, you can say, I can see that you're in the middle of a game and you might want to finish it. And I can see that you're upset now that I've asked you to do something else. Would you be willing to just start the dishes? Start washing them or put them away. Make it really clear and actionable. Because if you say, do the dishes, what does that mean? If you wanted them to wash them and put them away, you need to make that very clear. So you ask them if they'd be willing to do it and then say when. Because if you don't say when, then they'll do it in a week. Or they'll do it in 2 weeks, or they'll just, oh, I was going to get around to it. So ask them specifically what and when you want them to do it, and then they can say yes or no. If they say, oh, but I told my friends that I was going to play 2 more games, then you ask them, oh, okay, like I can see that I mean, you might not want to use this with a child because they don't know what integrity is, but in your brain you can say, okay, they have a need for integrity. They want to do the things that they said they will. And then your strategy can be asking them to do it after the second game, and then maybe they'll be like, oh yeah, that's okay, like I just didn't want to stop right now because I just told my friends that we were going to play 2 games. And then you find that point of understanding, but only because you had that curiosity, because you're willing to actually listen to and empathize with their needs that are not being met, and why they had that emotional reaction.
Understanding why they're doing what they're doing as opposed to automatically labeling them as wrong or bad. And when we understand them, we understand their why they're doing what they're doing, and we can have compassion for them, and we can help each other get our needs met.
And then once you empathize with them and you have that point of understanding and you show them through your words or through your actions that you understand their point of view, you understand why they would want to play that second video game if they told their friends. Now they are more likely to be receptive to what need it would meet for you. Say, like having the dishes cleaned would meet your need for cleanliness or reassurance to know that it was going to get done. If you had just said that right off the bat, they probably wouldn't really listen. They'd be like, okay. But if you empathize with them first and then come to a point of agreement, then they're more likely to be able to hear out what need it meets for you and see doing that thing as a way to contribute to your well being, as opposed to seeing it as something they're being forced to do.
Yeah. When people try to compel me to do something, my gut reaction, and maybe it's changing, is to do the opposite. Like the immediate example is I was driving and I was at maybe a red light or a green light and I could take a right, but there was someone crossing and the guy behind me started laying on the horn like for a while, not just like beep beep you should go. Like maybe you couldn't see the pedestrian, but he just like he fell asleep on that horn. And my reaction is like, well, now I'm not gonna go. I'm gonna take extra time there. Like you don't talk to me like that. You don't beep at
Yeah.
me. How dare you? I'll show you who's boss. And this is like me practicing empathy, doing meditation, and then just like simple thing. Like this guy, instead of instead of being hearing like, "Hey, I'm in a need for efficiency. Could you be a little bit quicker with your car?" I get this like ego rage of coming out. It's so easy. It's so easy. So I imagine like someone who isn't practicing, how easy they're going to go in the opposite direction when they hear a demand.
Yeah, when you create space for that understanding, then you're also creating space for a response instead of just reacting in the moment. Like you actually have a second to process what you would like to do and how you would want this situation to go instead of just reacting in the moment and getting defensive because you have that point of understanding. So MVC helps you to respond instead of just react.
Yeah.
And in that situation, it's kind of tough because people on the road can't really use their words unless they're yelling at you out a window. So that is a bit of a tricky situation.
They usually don't use NBC when they yell out the window.
No.
Excuse me, sir, I noticed that you've slowed down. And I have a feeling.
Yeah, it's really not how it works on the road, but I think that having grace with people, you can still have understanding for people without having a conversation. And that's the beauty of NVC. It doesn't require the other person's participation.
I love that. I was just fantasizing. In the future, we'll have an NBC app in which we can talk to other cars. Like you'll be able to like speak to the person in front of you. Press a button. People would,
Imagine.
and
That would
you
be
can
hilarious.
maybe you have options, so you can hear exactly what they're speaking, saying, or you can jackal to giraffe translator. So like
Yeah.
someone's like, "You moron, get a move on it," and then all you hear is like, "Excuse me, sir."
I have a need for speed.
I have a need for efficiency and order. Would you please be willing to accelerate to 30 miles per hour?
I have a need for autonomy and you're kind of in the way.
And then I can say the same thing back to him. Make me. And the guy hears, I'm in need of a little more empathy, right? $1 billion product.
You know what? They have translators now where in real time you can translate things into different languages. Like if you're speaking in Spanish, there can be like a hearing aid that you hear in English.
Yeah.
And I think it would be really cool if they did that with nonviolent communication. Just like everything that everybody says, instead of hearing their judgments and criticisms and assumptions, like you just hear it in nonviolent communication.
We'll just have like couples retreats and like you just go there, you put in your giraffe hearing aid and you're able to resolve problems.
Imagine. I think that would be really beneficial. But I would also say that NBC is not just about the framework. Like it's also a mindset because sometimes what people want is empathy, or maybe they want you to take action on something, or maybe they just want you to share a similar experience. And to do those things, you don't have to go through the framework like, oh, here's step number one, step number two, step number three. Oh, I forgot a request. Let me make a request. Like, it's not always about just doing that, but it's about getting to that point where you can understand what are they needing. Like if they need empathy, maybe the way that they need empathy is for you to just be a listening ear without commenting on anything, or maybe they just want to like bounce ideas back and forth with you on something. Like it's not always about just the framework, and that's the only thing that I say because I want to stick with NVC. Like it's not that strict.
I agree that and with that. I think even talking like that, I think I watched a seminar by Marshall Rosenberg in which someone said people called me robotic. And if you're using a language outside of how you usually talk, it's going to cause a disconnection as well. It may cause a disconnection. And so it's like the beginner. Like you learn something new. This is how the teacher teaches you, but then you incorporate it into a natural language for you. And that natural language for you, incorporating NVC, might just be like, oh my God. And that's it right there. It is just, I mean, situationally, that might be what your body comes up with to convey.
Connection or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely learned that the hard way because when I first learned NVC, I was focused on practicing the framework, and I was doing it so much that someone that's really close to me in my life was like, "Hey, can you just not use that psychology stuff with me?" Because I had explained it to them before and they noticed that I was using it, but I was like overusing it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Like using it when they didn't want me to use it.
I'm totally the same way. Like I deep dive into things and tend to go far beyond where I should.
And as you practice it, you kind of learn different ways to express the framework without using the exact words. So it's kind of like you learn reflective listening. Like you can hear someone and then kind of guess their needs, but without saying, do you have a need for reliability that's not being met? Like without saying it like that, sometimes I'll say something like, it's like you need reliability. And then if they say yes, then it goes with that. But if they say no, then I get more understanding in the end. So by making that assumption without being overly focused on being right, it allows for more connection without having to be super strict with the framework, but you're still implementing it.
If someone says, my boss is a jerk, like just responding with like, oh my God, what happened? I think that is so much more sufficient than breaking into the framework.
Or just asking them, like, is it because he's not respecting you? Because then, like, in your head, you're like, okay, they might need respect. But if they say no, then you can keep guessing, or maybe they'll expand on it and you'll get more context to make a different question.
Yeah. But going toward that, well, it's so situational. It's hard for me to abstract it. Like being curious so that you can have more information, so that you can better show up,
Right.
is key.
And that's why it's important not to be tied to a specific outcome. Like, if you're just curious, then it's okay because even if they say, no, that's not how I'm feeling or that's not what I need, you get closer to understanding what they do need. So, hearing no as a need is really helpful because if I ask you to do something like, hey, my car is broken down, could you drive me to the store? And you say no,
Nah,
like, no, I'm good on that.
I'll
I
play
can hear
video
that
games.
as a need. Even if you don't tell me what it is, I can still guess. I can say, oh, um, is it because you have somewhere to be? And if you're like, no, then I can keep guessing. I could say, oh, like, is it because you're watching a show right now or you're about to go do something with your car? No, you can keep guessing. But if they expand on it, then you get more context and then you can find a point of understanding. Because eventually they might say yes. And if you understand why they're saying no, then you can figure out something that works for both of you. Or if they're like, no, I just don't want to drive you anywhere, then that gets you closer to getting your need met because you can find someone else that will. Instead of just being like, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, why won't they do it? Like, are they mad at me? It's like, no, you understand why they don't want to do it. They tell you why they don't want to do it, or you guess, and then you find someone else that can, or find another strategy.
It brings up into me, for some reason, when people ask for things, like there's always going to be a reason why like I don't want to do it. Like I'm watching TV, like I'm hungry, so or like I was at the gym and like this old guy asked like to cut in and he's like, do you mind if I cut in? And I was like, no, I'd rather you didn't. And I said that, and then he was talking to his partner, and he was like in his 90s. And so I just wanted to finish. Like I had my idea of why what I wanted, but obviously he kept talking about it and it was bothering him, and so I was like, well, like it really doesn't matter to me. Like I, it's not a huge inconvenience, and even if it was a little inconvenience, like why can't I go out of my way to help him? Because
Right.
my sometimes I see like, well, you can wait, you could do something else, and I don't understand what's going on in someone else to need to ask, and so like it was a recent experience that says like, hey, if someone is requesting something of me, whether it is a sweet, nice request using clear language or it's a request uh, in Jackal. Then what can I do to show up and meet that need? And it was a powerful experience to just to recognize that it's not automatic in me to just do that. Like I have to work to meet to respond to requests, to meet people's needs, and I could see the processing and the benefit on my own to do that.
Yeah, it's also been really helpful for me to see their need and then understand what need it would meet for me to do that thing for them. So, like, he asked you if he could cut in. I'm not really sure what that means. Does that mean, like, for you to stop what you're doing and him to use whatever you're using?
Yeah, so like oftentimes when working out, you do a set and then there's like a rest while your body recuperates between your next set, and people will work in. So basically during your rest, they'll do their set.
Okay, I got you. So maybe that would meet their need for efficiency or something, because they think they're getting it in faster instead of having to wait on you. But then maybe it could meet your need for cooperation or for empathy or understanding for what he needs it for. So instead of just seeing it as like, oh, I'm only doing this to meet their need, you can see a way that it could benefit you as well, even if it's not direct. Like, they don't have to know that you're doing it not only because it meets their need, but also because it meets your need. Like it can be like a quiet thing, you know, like or reassurance to know that you have care for someone other than yourself. You know, it could be as simple as that.
And what's strange is like I love to support people. Like I think we all enjoy helping people. And yet somehow in that moment it doesn't click. It seems like I'm burdened. Like my mind goes, I'm burdened, and I'd have to wipe down, reset the machine, and change the seat, and change the length of this. I'd have to go and get another spray bottle, and then change the weights, and like you're old, and you're going to take 20 minutes on it. And it's not going to. I'm going to lose my momentum. And it's just like this story there. And instead of just seeing like, oh, I can help you now. I can make your life a little bit better and get your needs met. Well, that sounds fantastic, and it's going to be like super easy for me to do as well. Yeah, please.
Yeah, our brain it tends to focus on the inconveniences rather than how we can help someone else. Especially in those moments whenever people ask you without any context if they can do something, you know.
Do you mind? And my mind goes, well, what are the reasons I wouldn't want to do it? It's just how I'm wired. I like analytically. Well, let me get my pen out. There are 9 reasons.
That's true. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree with them either. Like a lot of people think that in order to do something for someone that you have to agree with them on their reasons for doing it. But at the end of the day, it's like you can do something for someone or have understanding for someone without completely agreeing with their perspective on things. And that's why circling back to like a different example, people have a lot of arguments, whether it's with their significant other, with their kids, or people online. And their main thing is like they're trying to be right. And instead of doing that, seeing it as like an opportunity for understanding, an opportunity to connect, and respecting them without automatically accepting what they say is true or agreeing is better in the long term because you're able to have a conversation without it being some sort of power struggle.
Yeah, empathy isn't about right or wrong.
Exactly. I always say connection over correction. That doesn't mean
I
that
like that one.
afterwards you don't tell them what was wrong. If you're able to connect with someone first, then they're more willing to understand and comprehend what they said that was not right. So Marshall Rosenberg actually talks about this example. I might not have it exactly correct, but it'll get the point across. So I think it was like some immigrant said something to an American and said like, I can't believe that you would have Dwayne Johnson as your president. That's so stupid. And you know that Dwayne Johnson is not the president, but before you go in and just say you're wrong, that's not even true, you can still empathize with them first, connect with them and say like, are you saying that because you have a need for trust that's not being met? And then they can tell you why. And then you tell them, well, Dwayne Johnson is not the president. And
That was
like if
just a
you connect
movie.
with them first instead of being like, you're wrong, this is why you're wrong, this is what's right, like that's obviously gonna just lead to an explosive argument. But if you connect with them first, I mean that's a silly example, but if you connect with them first before correcting them, you're more likely to get your point across to them.
Yeah, understand their reality.
Yes, exactly.
With Dwayne Johnson as president, that might, you know, I can see that that could be how you would perceive that reality in the way you're saying you're perceiving it.
That's like I used to work in memory care, so people with Alzheimer's and dementia and there was this one couple every day they would come up to the front and they thought that we were on a boat. They thought we were on a cruise ship. Every day they would ask me like, "What's the next stop? When are you serving dinner next? Like, what's the next meal?"
I feel seasick today.
Exactly. And instead of being like, "We're not on a boat," instead of just like saying it like that and not trying to understand where they're coming from, I would try to assess their need underlyingly first. So they want to know what's our next stop. I can say, like, do you have anything going on that you're trying to make plans around? Because there's a reason why they're asking that thing. You know what I mean? Or are you just trying to get more understanding? And then after I can understand where they're coming from or what they're actually needing underneath what they're asking specifically, then I can go in and be like, well, we're actually not on a boat. And it's still a silly example, but this is true. Or they say, "When's the next time we're eating?" An hour after we just had lunch, but they didn't remember that we just had lunch, so they would be asking, "When is lunch?" Instead of saying, "We just had lunch," and saying it every day, even though I would get, like, kinda frustrated, like, they do this every day, an hour after we eat. They ask me when lunch is, and we just had it. Instead of going into all of that and saying it, I just ask them, "Are you hungry right now? Or do you need a snack? Or do you need something to tie you over until the next meal?" And if they say yes, then I can get them something and then explain, "We just had lunch like an hour ago, but I can get you a snack so that it'll tie you over until dinner and it's at this time." So instead of just being like, "You're wrong, this is why you're wrong," having understanding for their reality, like you said, or their perspective, and then empathizing with that, and then telling them what is correct, you're more likely to get your point across without them being like, "Oh, well, you're just trying to be rude," or like without them having some sort of negative reaction or judgment towards you.
I love that connection, and I feel a bit of joy when you are NVC in practice in situations where people need it.
Yeah, and they do. They don't know any different, and they're probably gonna ask me the same thing tomorrow, but that's
They're
okay.
not getting better. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Like, and it's not like I'm trying to fix them. I'm not trying to win. It's not like it's an argument just because we disagree. But I'm trying to have understanding for their perspective so that they're more willing to hear what is actually true. And then they can have understanding for that and act accordingly. But it's not like I'm just trying to like prove them wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't matter.
And just because you disagree, it doesn't mean that you have to have an argument. Like it can literally just be an opportunity for you to connect more if you allow it to be.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak directly with our audience if there was anything that, any message that you wanted to share with them.
Well, I continue to post on Instagram. So if you want to see content about compassion or keep up with what I'm doing, then feel free to check out my Instagram. I'm also going to start posting on TikTok and I have a YouTube account, but my Instagram is nonviolent communication underscore. And then my YouTube is NBC Real Talk. And I'm also on Twitter. I don't know if a lot of people that watch this use Twitter, but that's the same handle, nonviolent communication underscore. So if you want to learn about compassion, or if you want to message me directly if any questions came up in the podcast that you're like, I don't really know what you're talking about there, or does this really apply? Like, feel free to ask me anything. Like, I'm open to questions and learning more. And if there's anything that you think that I said that you just don't agree with and you want to have more understanding, feel free to reach out. Like, I'm totally open.
And you have a podcast as well.
Yes, I do. I just started one, and that's on Spotify and YouTube.
And are you looking to bring on any guests? Should people contact you if they
Oh,
want to be on it?
absolutely.
And if so, like
Absolutely.
who should contact you?
Anyone interested in NVC or interested in learning more about it? Maybe there might be some people that already know what it is and just want to have a conversation and ask questions to deepen their understanding. Or maybe they have no idea what it is and they're kind of coming from a skeptical perspective. Like, I'm open to either. As long as you're able to have like a respectful conversation, I'm willing to have a conversation with anyone.
Nice. I want to express some appreciation. I love that we were able to connect, that you've put this time and energy to prepare to come here and to spend, I'm not sure, it's been over an hour to talk and explore and have fun with NBC. And I've really enjoyed it and I've found it informative. And I believe other people will as well. And just your examples of what you're doing and what you have done, brings joy and excitement to me. So thank you very much.
I really appreciate that. That was so sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it more. Obviously, this is something I'm really passionate about and I love spreading the word about nonviolent communication and I'm really excited and grateful that other people had the opportunity to listen to our conversation. So thank you.
You're very welcome.